Hello everybody, and welcome to the EUA webinar on the European Innovation Council. So the European Innovation Council, or EIC for short, is not a new thing on the blog. It's something that was talked about during the last commission under Commissioner Carlos Moedas as a flagship project of the European Commission. I think it's fair to say that when it came out, there was a bit of skepticism from the university community. EUA, if you go back in history, you'll find a response that's somewhat cool. But the thing was set up as a response to a real problem, which in that period after the financial crisis, after 2008, was access to capital, which was a big priority. And the council also aimed at startups, scaling up startups and issues like this, which coincided with universities that entered into much more deep engagement with open innovation after the financial crisis as sort of a reinvention of the regional innovation policies. You can read more about that in a publication that we made about a year ago, and it's in the handout section on your right side of your screen. So it's interesting now to see how this developed. Talk a little bit about the relationship between universities and the EIC. Now that the program has grown up, we're at the end of the pilot, we're starting with the real thing next year, if everything goes well. So this is why we have the webinar today. We have interesting speakers. Unfortunately, there was a cancellation from Stefan Eic, who talked about what it feels like to be a startup using this instrument, but there'll be other occasions to talk about this. This is certainly not the last time EUA will talk about startups. I also have to make an apology for being an all-male panel. This is, of course, not an excuse, but it is an issue within the whole innovation scene that it is extremely male-dominated, I think even more than the already much too male-dominated research scene. So not an excuse, but maybe a little bit of an explanation why this is. Before we kick off with our speakers, I would just give some technical information. We have a very nice slide for that. If I can have that, please. There you go. You have on your right-hand side, you have a chat function where you can write to each other and say hello and make technical issues, remarks, as much as you like. We have a questions and answers section where you can ask directly to the speakers, and we'll then collect and publish some of the questions. And then, and we'll do that in a moment, we have a poll as well, where we can sort of see where you are and what you think as an audience. As I said, we also have some handouts on the far right side where you can find some documents. You can find, I think, also a link to related webinars that are on our YouTube channel, which you should then go to, and if you like it, subscribe to it. Our webinars are recorded. This webinar, I should say, is recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for information. So this being said, I think we can go directly to our speakers. We have two speakers with different functions today. So we'll start out with Keith Sequeira, who was former cabinet of the Research Commissioner Carlos Moedas, now head of unit in the European Innovation Council in the European Commission. And he will start out with sort of the view from the Commission about the goals and what this instrument is for and how to use it. And after that, we have Fredrik Høsted, who is also engaged in the EIC board, and also as Vice Chancellor, Vice President for Utilization at Chalmers University in Sweden, which is one of the, I dare say, leading technical universities in Europe. So without further ado, let's hear what this is all about. Keith, please, floor yours.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Also with Frederick, who is a member of our advisory board that's been helping us really set the strategy and direction for the European Innovation Council. I thought I'd try and to set the scene for this, to say a few words about why we're doing this, to recap. I think you mentioned some of this, Thomas. A few slides on where we've got to. We're really at the end of the pilot phase of the European Innovation Council that started at the end of 2017. And then to move on, some expectations about what we expect, what will be different, what's the ambition for Horizon Europe with the full European Innovation Council. And then I'll finish with a few thoughts about why this is, we think, incredibly relevant to universities. So why are we doing this? If we look across Europe, we see, the classical criticism that we have very good research performance, but it's not really translated into the innovations. And if we look at the types of innovation, we've been really missing out on the new categories of innovation. So we've done a lot of incremental innovation, but missed out on the big disruptions. If we looked at innovation funding, we see two gaps. I mean, there's this gap which is really about how do you get from the laboratory into a kind of viable business proposition, but then also a gap particularly for high technology risk companies and startups. How do you get the investment to really get to market and scale up? And then if we look at the ecosystem across Europe, I think one of the big developments in recent years, we have some very strong ecosystems emerging across Europe, but they're pretty fragmented at European level still, and we still have quite a lot of regions with quite weak ecosystems. And then the big question is, who is going to be leading in the next generation of technologies? If we go back, probably a century now, Europe was very clearly the leader of new technologies coming out at that time. We see over the last 50 years that leadership has switched to the US and now increasingly to Asia. But there is a whole set of new technologies that are coming along. And the question is, who leads on this? And you'll see that many of these are actually very much based on science and scientific breakthroughs. So we believe that Europe has a real potential here. And the EIC is really trying to position Europe to take a leadership role in these next generation technologies and the innovations that come from them. So what have we done so far? As I mentioned, we started at the end of 2017. And the idea was to create a single place for disruptive, deep tech, breakthrough innovators to overcome the kind of fragmentation of different schemes that we had at the time. And we've come to realize that when we talk about innovators, we're not just talking about companies and entrepreneurs, we're also talking about innovators in universities, in research institutions. And we believe these innovators are going to become more important given the trend towards this kind of deep tech or science-based innovations. We're trying to reform the whole of our funding to make it much more agile, to work with technologies and innovations which move very quickly, where you need to pivot very quickly. So our traditional approach and framework program of long-term R&D projects doesn't really work in this kind of area of innovation. And we're working towards these three schemes. The Pathfinder is the successor of the Future and Emerging Technologies. The Accelerator is as the successor of the SME instrument, where we've also now introducing the equity funding for companies. But there's a new element here in the middle, the transition funding, where we've seen that it's actually very hard to get from the kind of endpoint of a Pathfinder project, many research projects where you have interesting technology in the lab, to a point where you can really apply for the accelerator, which means you have a company, you have a business plan, we can sort of judge what is the valuation and what steps are needed. And then this is an approach that we offer funding plus ecosystem. So it's not just funding, it's we've been growing a set of business acceleration services, and we actually offer all of these to the Pathfinder projects. It's not just for the companies. We've recruited the program managers, and the first program manager was with this very much different hands-on approach to managing the funding. And we're looking to really help entrepreneurs, innovators, including from universities, to bring in other investors. So a few sort of facts and figures about the pilot phase. We actually produced an impact report a couple of months ago in September. It was using the key performance indicators that Frederick helped us with. And we've seen, I mean, first of all, the budget now is a quite significant budget. It's over 1.5 billion in this year. So for those people who think that there's a massive increase in the EIC budget in the future, it's not true. We're actually looking at a decrease in the EIC budget going into Horizon Europe. We've seen a huge demand, more than 12,000 companies, startups, SMEs, just in the last year. And what I haven't put on here is that we had the last cut-off, the last call for the FET Open, and we had more proposals than we've ever seen before. A big step for us was to launch the equity part with the establishment of a dedicated fund. It's not the EIB, it's a dedicated fund to take these very high risk investments, which are so important for technology-based spin-outs and startups. We had some specific initiatives to support COVID innovations, to support Green Deal innovations, and to do more on gender and female innovators. Since the summer, we have our first kind of a crop of program managers, 2 in the health area and 2 around energy, Green Deal, actually looking at portfolios and trying to work with the portfolios to make this transition to market and innovation. And as I mentioned, we've been expanding the business acceleration services. To give you an idea of what it looks like, I mean, this is the Pathfinder, the Future and Emerging Technologies. This is classified by application areas, but also by technologies. So you see a lot going on, particularly in digital and health areas, a lot of scientific output, but also a lot of innovation that's coming out of it. If I go to the accelerator and the SME startups that we've been supporting, over 5,000, including the previous SME instruments. We've been tracking how successful these companies are at raising finance, and we've seen that they've raised over 5 billion in private finance since the EIC support. So we can see that really that this is having an impact on the market. We have over 40 companies that are really a quite major size now. And although it's been mostly bottom up, we've seen it's really sort of naturally focusing on areas which are EU priorities around the Green Deal, around digital and around health. So we're reaching the end of this pilot phase and doing a lot of work for designing the EIC with the new rules under Horizon Europe to really have something that meets the ambitions. So it's going to be established in the legislation when it comes into force. It has its own budget. It will have its own work program. It will remain a mainly bottom-up approach, but we can also have targeted funding where we see emerging technologies or innovations. It has a dedicated governance. It's a little bit like the ERC Scientific Council, advising on the strategy, but also on the follow-up. So we have, at the moment, the Pilot Advisory Board, but that will formally be established next year. We're creating an agency to hold all of the EIC activities together with the fund so that we have a sort of simple organization behind this. We've been doing a lot of work to improve how to apply the terms and conditions of the different instruments that I mentioned and how we can build the acceleration services. We're trying to put more flexibility into the funding and really introduce this role of the program manager that can work with the projects and pivot with them and see what the adaptations are and to link them to other parts of the ecosystem. And then we have some new possibilities that we're working on. We have this fast track process that means that we can build on the results of existing projects and try and take them much faster to the accelerator. So we're particularly looking at this for European Research Council and their proof of concept schemes. And we also have a way that companies supported under national programs and national innovation agencies can be passed for their scale-up phase to the European Innovation Council. And as a kind of forum to bring together ecosystem actors, we have the EIC Forum. So this is how our board looks like at the moment. You'll see Frederick there. It's a very interesting board, I think. I don't know what Frederick's view on this will be, but we really have people going from sort of research to innovation, from universities, from tech transfer, investors, corporates. So it's a very, very diverse group, but I think it's gelled extremely well, and some extremely important advice coming out has really been helping us. I mean, they've set out this vision that the EIC is really about pioneering a European approach. It's quite unique in the world and having this DARPA-style approach for the technology, but linking that to an accelerator for companies and scaling up. This idea that it should be a hallmark of excellence for innovation in the same way that ERC is for fundamental research. The point about crowding investors, but also being an impact fund for the rest of Horizon and indeed national programs, and to establish this reputation as an investor of choice and really focusing on these difficult to invest in kind of innovations and technologies. We're also working on some key partnerships. It's not an isolated part of the ecosystem. We have a working group with the European Research Council, Scientific Council, and we're looking at how this link between research results and take-up through the European Innovation Council can work in practice. We have a working group with the board of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. We have some agreements with some of the KICs to see how we can work together. I mean, we're really trying to get past this problems we've had in the past with fragmented initiatives and make sure all of these initiatives are pushing in the same direction. And we have some, I think, important advances with the structural funds, with the Seal of Excellence approach, where they can use the certification through our evaluation process to directly award projects, companies support without the need for further evaluation or any complications around state aid. So let me finish with a few thoughts about why this is important for universities. I mean, we see, of course, universities are already very present in the pilot, particularly in the Pathfinder side, but we see a lot of spin-outs from universities coming to the accelerator. And we see a trend over time that this is increasing. We started off, I think, a lot more with established SMEs. We've now moved quite a lot towards startups, spin-outs, younger companies, smaller companies, more technology-based companies. Of course, the EIC is a big chunk, a big pillar of Horizon Europe, at the center of this new innovative Europe pillar of Horizon Europe. And this focus on the deep tech wave of innovation is incredibly relevant to universities and academic spin-offs. So how do we see this working? Well, certainly we want universities to be applying to the EIC in large numbers. It's really important to sort of differentiate with things like the ERC, so to have those researchers that really want their technologies to reach an application. The new transition funding that we are considering is exactly about supporting academic spin-outs to move to work with companies to form spin-outs and to become investable. University spin-outs are becoming a major client for the accelerator, applying for the accelerator, and we hope this will continue. And then I know many universities have investment funds, and in our investment part, we will be increasingly looking for investment partners to co-invest in the companies that we support. So I hope that was helpful as a sort of kickoff, Thomas, and very much looking forward to the discussion.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. I think that was interesting. I think it's not a surprise that you get all these spin-offs that apply, because at least what we see from anecdotal evidence, there is this growing gray zone of startup spin-offs that are sort of in the university, on the edge of the university, and of course with the deep tech and these technologies. That is interesting. But just to get a little bit more of a let's say, you can call it evidence about this, we just launched, before we go to Frederick, a small poll to see the audience, what they think and how they use these things. So we have a couple of questions for you. They'll come up on the screen, and you can you can have a click on what you think is best for you. I don't know if we see the results. I think you see them on. I have to say I can't see them. Okay. Interesting. I can't see the results. I'm sure they're very interesting, but I can't see them. There we go. Now I can. It's because I don't know the tool well enough. Okay, so it's involvement in European partnerships. It's good old European added value. That's very interesting. Let's go to the next question and see how that evolves about the funding sources that you have access to. Yeah, it's stabilizing there. For the national, not overly surprising, I would say. I mean, most countries have these initiatives. Structural funds, much more than venture capital. And that is, I don't know, Keith, if that's a success factor or a proof that the original idea that this would facilitate the access to lack of venture capital in Europe is that it means that it was a good idea from the start. Maybe that just merits a short comment, Keith.
Sorry, Thomas, I can't quite see the poll results. Maybe you can repeat the question.
If people can't see the poll results, we go on the polls on your right side. It was difficult for me as well. And you'll see there's open and closed. And if you look at the closed, you can see the two we did. Go to the third one now. Can you see them now? And it says, which other funding sources have you been able to access? And people have been able to access national innovation initiatives, obviously, structural funds. So also what you said about the seal of excellence, the synergies that are there, but only 9% have access to venture capital.
No, I mean, it's very interesting. What I showed in my slides was really about tracking the companies that we've supported in the years after the EIC support. And we can see that many of the companies, of course, we have failures as well. We're trying to take risk. But many of the companies have been very successful at raising capital afterwards. And most of that comes from venture capital, not all of it. But this is not, up until now, this is not something that we've been able to do at the same time. And I think the big change, which is only just starting now, I think we'll announce our first investments next week, is this establishment of the EIC fund that actually makes ourselves, the European Commission is now itself a venture capitalist. We will be putting equity into these companies through the EIC fund. But more than that, our aim is by doing this, we will allow spin-out companies to get more investment coming in from venture capitalists and others. We see that venture capitalists find it very difficult to invest in very high technology risk companies. So we're doing a lot of the homework for them to assess the technologies, the companies. And what we see in Europe is that when companies and spin-outs do get funding, they tend to get small amounts and it takes them a long time. So what we're trying to achieve with the EIC is that these companies can get larger amounts much faster because this is so important for the scale up. So, I mean, it's very interesting, this poll and this sample, but this is really our probably #1 target of what we want to change in the coming months.
Yeah, no, that's interesting to know and quite a change. But it also shows some of the original ideas that you had when you set it up are still very much relevant. Okay, so we go for our last question in this round about what the purpose of this thing is for you. And let's see. and that seems quite unanimous. It's about translating research into an innovative business. I say we might have a slightly biased sample here because most of our audience will be from universities, and that's of course a major thing. You do research and then you make it into a business. But that's interesting to know as well, that there's so many on that state, and the scale up is maybe less interesting for universities. Not completely surprising, but very clear results there. Okay, thanks a lot to all of you who voted and made us all wiser about what goes on out in universities. We'll now have a more in-depth and qualitative input from Frederik Børstedt, who will talk about his role, I think, as an advisory board member and how this looks from the university perspective. Please, Frederik, go ahead.
Many thanks, Thomas, and many thanks for the opportunity to come here and to provide some perspectives on the EIC and the opportunities for, well, opportunities for universities for sure, but I would like to take a bit broader perspective, as you will mention shortly. Big thanks also to you, Keith, for an informative and clear presentation. I also got that in advance, and I have run through it, and I would like to make some comments, really from three different perspectives. The first will be the university perspective. The second will be the perspective of innovation ecosystem, and not, innovation ecosystems in the general sense, but university-close innovation ecosystems. That is the actors of incubation, investment, tech transfer that are close to European universities. And you can also include science parks, research technology organization, RTOs, into this category. And then I have a third perspective as well, from the level of the member states. So in my personal case, it is Sweden, and I see that the Swedish research and innovation system, research and innovation policies, they are really not fully attuned to the latest developments within the European Commission and the EIC. And I think this is an interesting perspective because here we have a catch-up potential for Sweden and other member states as well. So those are the three trains of thought that I will follow while making these comments. And if we start off then with the university perspective, what's in it for universities? I think that it's really clear that we as universities need to prepare for the type of calls that the Pathfinder represents. These calls are challenge-driven, they are strategically oriented and long-term, but they are challenge-driven. They are multidisciplinary and works across scientific boundaries, and they also call for cross-sectorial collaboration. So these are three core items, core aspects, I would say, that we will see more from. And university, I see from the attendance list here that there is a lot of university people, of course, and you know that universities are typically organized in a different way. They are built in silos, where each one of the academic units kind of drills really deep into their respective subject matter areas. And I would say that this is really a fundamental organizational dimension of any universities. And it might cause some challenges if we are to address issues that are more broad, more complex, more substantiated. That is the type of problems that the Pathfinder focus on. And this highlights really the ability to work across departmental silos and across subject matter areas. It's typically a good thing doing this, because if we use multidisciplinarity properly, it's a lever for scientific impact. But working across disciplines, working across subjects is not always an easy task. And my experience is that we need quite strong incentives, quite strong stimulus to have researchers thinking about alternative ways for how to go about developing new knowledge. I think instead of thinking more deeply within our current fields, we would also like to encourage researchers to think across fields as they define research questions. From my university, Chalmers, which is on the west coast of Sweden, we get around 90 million euros in base funding for research from the Swedish government every year. And this funding consists of about 30% of our entire research budget. We take away 20 million euros out of these 90. And we say that if you, departments, would like to get access to these funds, you need to make proposals to Chalmers management, make proposals for challenge-driven multidisciplinary research to be conducted in cross-sectorial collaboration. And we've been running this model now for 8 or 9 years, and our experience is that it takes some time. It takes really long time before it's accepted, but once it's there, it really helps.
Okay, but while we wait for this, I'm sure we'll be okay in a moment. Keith, I can see a number of questions in the chat about the links between the ERC and the EIC. Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about how you see the links between those two? So it's more concretely about the proof of concept.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, we've been. Can you hear me? Okay, Thomas. Let me just check. Okay. No, I think. I mean, to start with, we took the ERC very much as an inspiration for the EIC, because the ERC is about giving freedom to researchers, not prescribing what topics, really focusing on the individual principal investigator, having this bottom-up approach, having the community through the scientific council really in charge. So the first thing I would say is that we took very much the philosophy of the ERC and then applied it to innovators. So it's about giving freedom to innovators, not being prescriptive about what they were doing, and having this focus on the individual innovator or the team, and not the kind of the institution. So we took a lot of our inspiration, and we see ourselves now very much as a kind of sister to the ERC. Of course, we have very different objectives. The ERC is very important that it focuses on science for, really for the importance of knowledge and curiosity, and doesn't get sidetracked on innovations or applications. But then this is where we see that the EIC really helps, because there is a lot of fantastic output from ERC projects that has huge innovation potential. And we've already seen some projects or some technologies that have come from ERC and gone in, turned into spin-outs, and they've come to the EIC. The discussion with the members of the Scientific Council, it was very interesting. The first meeting, they said, well, we like the proof of concept scheme, but it's not enough. We need a super proof of concept scheme that can take things that come out from the proof of concept and really provide more substantial funding to turn these into kind of companies that can commercialize the innovations. So this was very much one of the bases for the transition scheme that we've been designing and will be introduced next year. But we've also been looking at the role of program managers to actually go and look at ERC projects and try and say, where is the innovation potential? So we've started this with some of our program managers in partnership with the ERC. And it's very interesting because scanning through ERC projects, you can see there's a lot of innovation potential. Of course, it may not be the researcher who wants to take the next step. So our job will be to see how can we make use of this innovation potential from the ERC. So I'll stop there, but I see Frederick is back now, but that was just to give you a flavor of some of our discussions with the ERC.
Okay, Frederick, you stopped where it was most exciting, the multidisciplinary teams. So please carry on. Yeah, that's what online events are about nowadays. But Keith, don't worry, we have many questions for you. I think the next that got a big number of votes here is if the agencies, so that the people that manage more closely the programs, are screen and orchestrate potential success stories And if you look at you collect stories that were particularly good.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Thomas? I can't see.
The question is, I'll read it in
questions as well. I don't know if there's some way that I can.
If you look at Q&A and then publish, then you can see them as well. Is the EIC or EASME screening with the project offices the Horizon results platform output and screen and orchestrate potential success stories towards EIC. I think that the question is more if there are people that look in the other Horizon bits and see if there's something that's interesting for the EIC.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Horizon Results platform, which is our new platform where we can make available in one place all of the results coming out of Horizon projects. We have another interesting initiative called the Innovation Radar, where in our project reviews, we really try and detect innovations coming out of other projects. And we see this as, we'll see increasingly that we want to be a kind of impact fund for the rest of the Horizon projects, that if there is a spin out technology, a company that comes out of the project that really wants to get to market, they can come to the European Innovation Council for the follow-up funding. And we've started this to some extent. And this is very much what the fast track scheme that I mentioned in my presentation is about, to really accelerate this process in future. So it's something we started and something that we'd very much like to build on in the coming years. I see Frederick is back again, so let's hope it's third time lucky.
Is that right? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Oh, wonderful. Please go on. Tell us more.
So sorry for this disturbance. The first point is really that from a university perspective, we would like to emphasize the increasing importance of the ability to engage to a larger extent in challenge-driven, multidisciplinary and cross-sectorial research. That's really the main point this far. And then I promised also to cover a second perspective, and that is the innovation ecosystems, and particularly those ecosystems that are close to universities. Ecosystem actors that can contribute to bringing research results and other university knowledge assets closer to societal impact. And we're talking about business incubators, science parks, RTOs, business angels, other seed investors, entrepreneurial hubs, entrepreneurial environments for startup companies, licensing partners, consultancies, etc. The list of actors really gets quite long, simply because innovation and impact differ quite widely across academic environments. But I think you recognize the type of actors that I'm thinking of. And I would like to make 2 points here. And the first one is really that the local innovation ecosystem actors are likely to become more important to universities in the future. And we have actors like the EIC leading the way. And this gets really clear if we regard not only the 2 components mentioned, the Pathfinder and the Accelerator, because the EIC actually have a third component as well. It's a kind of bridge between the Pathfinder and Accelerator, and it's perhaps you're familiar with the Innovation Launchpad program, for instance. You typically get a soft grant for turning Pathfinder results into innovations, bringing them closer to the market. Or you might have heard of the Transition to Innovation program, which is dedicated to a similar purpose. This is actually a third component, a transition component that will help turn research results into innovations and other outcomes that produces societal and economic impact. And this is under development currently. We are currently considering a launchpad type of instrument, an award. It's an innovation grant that are built in from the very start of Pathfinder projects. And we are thinking also of a more powerful transition tool that provides a much larger grant than previous ones for bringing research results closer to the market. And the point here is that actors that might not be researchers, they will have to be around and close by the academic environments if universities should be able to benefit fully from this type of support. Because I don't actually think it's fair nor effective to have primarily university researchers engaging in launchpad and innovation transition activities. I think researchers to a larger extent should be complemented by innovation ecosystem actors, because they are different from researchers. They have other incentives, they have other competencies, they have other driving forces. And I know that there are many prerequisites for this to happen at the local level, because every university has its own specific characteristics. It has its own unique societal context and collaboration setup. And there are very few, one sizes that fit all, but what we ultimately want is that innovation ecosystem actors can work more closely with the academics in innovation and transition activities to bring the research results closer to the market. And if this can be facilitated, the value of university-close innovation ecosystems will increase. They will increase in value for society, but it will also increase in value in the eyes of the university. And I think we talk a lot about university collaboration, and I think this is really good. Collaboration in research, collaboration in education clearly boosts the societal impact of universities, and it also improves the quality of research and education. And I think what we focus less on up until this point is collaboration in the innovation area. And I believe that the future winners, future university winners and innovation ecosystem winners in this respect are those that manage to increase their ability to create stronger, more seamless collaboration. And then we can have an even stronger contribution from universities to society. And one final comment here, I know that time has flown a bit due to the technical constraints, is that I think there might be perhaps just too many one-person orchestras of innovation in European universities currently, where academics are expected to run innovation activities all by themselves. And I think it's hard enough to be an excellent researcher, produce novel and world-leading knowledge, and you need to be an inspiring teacher as well. And to expect that you, on top of that, also should be an expert in running innovation processes, it might be too much. Some researchers, I think, a few, they can do this, but my view is that it might be too much to ask from all researchers. So I think it's an interesting option to look for the EIC, see how these transition offers, these innovation transition activities can be utilized, not only in the university context, but in the wider close-by innovation ecosystem. Then I think it can be a true win for society and for the university and for the innovation ecosystem actors as well. I stopped there now, Thomas. I skipped the last perspective on member states and national policy, and I let you lead the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, we actually do have a question about that as well, but many thanks. And I think I almost heard you say co-creation. I think that is a key word we hear a lot about this discourse. You say that it's not about universities doing everything or universities transferring knowledge, but it's actually about co-creating with other actors. I have two questions that I think you could at least kick off with. One is about the multidisciplinarity and the social science humanities, how that fit in, and you might. I know you have you're involved in the EIT as well. About the let's say the entrepreneurial skills part that is part of the innovation as well, and how that might fit with the EIC. But if you start out with social science humanities, how do you see that?
Absolutely, and I think science and getting value out of science is really like using your whole hand. if you just take natural sciences, engineering sciences, medical sciences, social sciences, and humanities, we really need to address all scientific disciplines if we are to have a fair chance of transforming this society into a sustainable one. And I think those solutions are really important for European industry and European business to consider, because they are the kind of future export successes of Europe. So it's absolutely key, and we've been touching upon it already when we talk about multidisciplinarity. But in the context of societal change and industry transformation, I mean, SH, social sciences and humanities, are really key. That's my affirmative view, I would say. It's a really good question, a strong point.
Yeah. And about the teaching mission, which has become, or let's say the educational learning mission is probably what we rather say, that has become stronger in the EIT. How do you see that mission in general, Frederick, and maybe also Keith? How does that fit with the EIC? Is that too much permission for that instrument, or how do you see that? But Frederick, if you kick that off, the entrepreneurial skills.
No, I don't think it. I can't really think of any instrument really that that should not be open for a broader integration of a wider set of research topics. I think SSH and the coupling with the other scientific disciplines are key. It's key definitely to EIC. The innovation pillar, it's in its entirety, and I think it's key also to the challenge-driven pillar. And it comes without saying that if you take a point of departure in society's challenges, then you really need to have this broad and substantiated knowledge base to be able to address those challenges, because all the kind of single discipline, or many of the single discipline challenges, they are like fruits hanging on the lower branches of the tree. And those are quite significantly picked. They are not empty at all. New fruit keep coming all the time, but we need also to stretch farther up in the tree and go for the more complex challenges in society.
Yeah. And concerning the skills element of this and the education part, I mean, it's been stronger in the EIT, but is there plans about integrating that in the EIC as well? I think that's maybe also the key. Keith.
Yeah, we've been working more and more closely with the EIT, particularly over the last year. We now have the same commissioner responsible for the EIT and the EIC, and she's very keen for us to really see how we can collaborate. So we've been sitting down with the EIT and really understanding what's going on in the KICs, and them understanding what are we doing in the European Innovation Council. And I think we see some pretty good synergies, complementarities. If I take what I was talking about, spin-outs and startups, the KICs, they can really help at the very early stage about how to kind of establish a business, but what they can't do is provide substantial funding for this company to really develop its innovation and scale up. So this is where the EIC comes in, and we're working with the EIT and the KICs that they can really kind of nurture their startups and spin-outs to come to the EIC if they need that kind of funding. But when you come to the kind of education and skills side of it, I think here we see that, you know, there's a lot of very good things that the EIT and the KICs are doing around entrepreneurship training for researchers, summer schools. So I think probably our view at the moment is this is not something that we want to make as a kind of core of the EIC. And this is something that we will work with the EIT. So if we have projects where there's researchers that really need this kind of entrepreneurship training, this is how we would see the collaboration with the EIT and the KICs. And we'd like to create a very kind of seamless approach where if we're supporting a project and they need to access some of the activities of the EIT, they can go straight there and vice versa. So I think that's how I'd see it. I think, Frederick, you also wanted to comment on this.
Yeah, Frederick.
I think it's a really good point from Keith that you cannot produce every outcome with every single instrument or every single program. But I think in general, your question, Thomas, it points out that the entrepreneurial abilities of students, that might be a very interesting alternative to go for in relation to not in competition with the things done in EIC-like programs, but in complement, of course. So from the societal perspective, what is more valuable, that we get a stronger funnel of Pathfinder projects, transition activities, innovation activities, and then accelerator companies, compared to having students with stronger entrepreneurial abilities and more students with entrepreneurial experiences as they leave universities. I think we really need to have a balance. And what we've seen also, I mean, we have many famous entrepreneurs who really have changed the world that are new grads from academia. Mark Zuckerberg and the likes, they are fantastic people. And not everyone should be Mark Zuckerberg, I'm not saying that. But if we can provide entrepreneurial experience with university students, I think that bodes for a better world for sure.
Very good point. And good to also underline, you know, what you say. Not every instrument should do everything. There's complementarity between instruments. We have time for one last question, which I think is interesting, and you both touch on it. National programs. How can national programs link to the EIC? And what can national funders and the applicants do to show where they are? Keith, you tell us where do you see this, the link to the national funders, which we saw were very important in the poll, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, when we were thinking about the EIC, I mean, one of the big questions is, what is the European added value here? I mean, what can we do which really makes it difficult to do in national programs? And this is why we stopped doing, some of you may remember the phase 1 SME instrument, which was the 50,000 grants for some first activities. We stopped doing this because we sort of saw that most national programs provide this. In fact, you know, I mentioned EIT. A lot of the EIT kicks provide this as well for their companies. So we saw that the real added value of the EIC on the accelerator side, it was about the scale up and really having these fairly unique companies that can scale up at European level. And then, as Frederick was saying, at the Pathfinder side, it's really about this interdisciplinarity and coming up with, you know, quite radical new ideas from the technologies, really tapping into all of the kind of ideas across Europe. So we've kind of designed it that we really feel, and the discussion has been with member states, that this is something that fits in well, complements what they do. But we have a new experiment that we will start next year in the Horizon Europe legislation. It allows us to actually work with national funding bodies, that they look at the results of their project, and if they assess that those results meet the criteria for the European Innovation Council, which is about, you know, radical new innovation, scale up potential, and too risky for you know, a private investor, then the national program can send that project to us at the European Innovation Council, and we will evaluate it directly for follow-up EIC support. So we're in a lot of discussions at the moment with member states about testing out this approach. It's not so easy. We have to make sure that we keep the level playing field, that we're not favoring some countries over other countries. We have to make sure that we keep the focus on excellence, that we're only supporting, you know, the most excellent in terms of innovation companies across Europe. But it's also, I think, very important because it's, you know, if at the moment we have no idea when a company comes to us whether it's been supported by a national program or not, or if so, what the experience has been. So I would see it as this way that we can really take the knowledge from a national program and use that knowledge to help us at European level find the most interesting innovators. And it's a bit the sort of opposite of the Seal of Excellence that I mentioned, because at the Seal of Excellence, you know, we look at the applicants that come to us, and the ones which are fantastic, but we don't have the budget, we can say to national programs, this is a great company for you to support. And this is a bit the reverse process, that the national program will say, we have this fantastic company, it's really a candidate for scaling up at European level, and then we would take over from there. So it's a very different relationship, not so easy to put in place, and we'll start with this. We're planning to start with this as a pilot phase next year.
Very interesting. Frederick, how does that look from the national level? Is there a good dialogue going on here? Would a reverse Seal of Excellence work in Sweden?
Yeah, I think so. And if you backtrack from that model, a reverse Seal of Excellence, I see that on the national level, member state level, we can really follow the same type of trend that has been ongoing within the European Commission. I mean, what we really are trying to do is to link the different financial instruments within Horizon Europe more strongly to each other. And I think that member states often face a similar situation. The system here in Sweden is quite scattered with a lot of national funding bodies. But my view is that a member state can mimic the approach of the European Commission. And we can also establish stronger ties, increase the crosstalk, increase the context of national funding bodies. And in this way, we can also develop a capacity, stimulate a capacity to go for these pan-European collaboration. So in this way, it goes hand in hand, national level development with pan-European development.
Perfect. I think that was very good, almost last words as we're about to close. We get close to the big policy issues of the European research area, where people talk and coordinate across borders. But for now, I think I want just to say thank you to the audience and thank you to the speakers. This was excellent input. I hope you all got wiser in how the instrument works, what does it look like today and in the future, what the possibilities are, and even a little bit wiser on university innovation and what that is. So good talks, good questions, excellent answers. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you all in further EUA webinars. Go to our YouTube channel, subscribe if you like it, and you'll see many more of these kinds of events. So thank you and goodbye.
Okay.
Okay, that was good.